The Harris campaign is leaning into different strategies and concepts than the Biden campaign was. The Biden campaign, much like what we talk about here on this show, was all about the fear, the danger of what would happen if Donald Trump were elected, the existential danger to the economy, to democracy at large. Kamala Harris has taken a different approach. She's leaning into the idea of hope and joy, and they mean very different things. And it's all framed, as I was just saying, in the idea of freedom. Now, let's talk about that freedom for a second. This is not just freedom as an American society. Take a look at this lineup. This is Phoenix, Arizona last night. There are no edits to this shot. This is the line of people looking to go talk to Kamala Harris or listen to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in Phoenix, Arizona last night. All right? 20,000 people, some people estimate. We heard from the Harris campaign 15,000 people. Now, that's just the beginning. That was 15,000 people last night. There was a rally in Detroit that had 15,000 people. Eau Claire, Wisconsin had 12,000 people. Philadelphia had something close to 15,000 people. In fact, in the 20 days since Joe Biden ended his reelection campaign and Kamala Harris took over at the top of the Democratic ticket, there's been an undeniable shift in the presidential race. And we are following that shift today. We're discussing what that shift has looked like. So this concept of freedom, it's not just freedom to vote. It's not just freedom over your reproductive, your reproductive freedoms. It is, as I said, freedom to read wherever you want to read. It's the freedom to vote, the freedom to make the choices that you want to make in an important society. Anyway, this is the kind of enthusiasm that message of freedom and joy is doing. And we're going to talk about that this morning. I'm joined by Steve Bullock, the former two-term Democratic governor of Montana. He's the co-chair of the Political Action Committee, American Bridge 21st Century, and he previously ran for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. Also with us is Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota. He's a former congressman for the state. He's the author of the book, Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Political Violence. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to talk to you both at exactly the same time. Governor, let me start with you. The Harris campaign is going to a lot of swing states. We've got the Cook Political Report moving Nevada and Arizona from likely Republican into toss-up. We've got polls, the Times and Siena putting out polls that show that Kamala Harris, within the margin of error, is ahead of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But we have Donald Trump today in your state, Montana. Tell me about that.
Yeah, Ali, you know, it sort of says a lot about the Trump-Vance campaign when you look at what Harris and Walz have been doing in the last week. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada. And the only time he leaves his golf course is to come to Montana, the Big Sky state. Look, even trying to get there, either the wheels fell off or the hydraulics went out on his plane, and he didn't make it all the way to Bozeman on the initial side. But I think that's one of those things, too. I mean, Montanans remember that he came 4 times in 2018 to campaign against my friend John Tester, and all we were left with was unpaid bills for our cities and towns. The energy and the excitement where Donald Trump's actually just worrying about his crowd sizes, and Harris and Walz are worrying about working people and the American people. I think that it's not only momentum, but it's actually the reality of fighting for this freedom and joy and talking about the difference that it can make in people's lives.
Joe Ellison, one of the things that's come up that Donald Trump brought up in his press conference that he's talked about, Tim Walz, is Minnesota after the George Floyd demonstrations. You remember I was there. You and I spoke. In fact, the morning after I took a rubber bullet, Floyd, George Floyd's brother, has come out and endorsed Tim Walz and said it's a man for the moment. That was a tough time in your state. It was hard to get it right. There were all sorts of things going wrong. I saw all of it happen. There were good protesters and bad protesters. There were good police and bad police. There was all sorts of things going on. Give me your impression of Tim Walz as it relates to how he governed Minnesota in that one of the most challenging times that state has seen in a very, very long time. Oh, hang on a second, Attorney General. We've got a mic problem. I think you might be muted. Let's unmute because I want to hear exactly what you have to say. There we go. You unmuted now?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Let's start again. Okay.
I was just going to say, that during that time, which I remember you being there on the scene very well, watching everything unfold, events were changing rapidly, but Tim Walz was attentive to the needs of the family. I'm so glad Philonise Floyd endorsed him. I know the family really felt good about the attention and concern that the governor showed to their family. He also was in constant touch with me, and as well as the Minnesota National Guard, and in terms of the cities. He acted, in my view, about as well as anybody could in a very difficult situation. He was quick, he was attentive, he was concerned. He also was respectful to the law and local authorities' responsibility. So I know that they're going to try to politicize how that went down. I know that none of them would have done any better, and Governor Walz did extremely well. He called out the National Guard, he appointed me, and he made personal and direct calls to the family. But I will tell you this, Ali, so did Kamala Harris. Yep. When we won that case, when the verdict came back and we convicted Derek Chauvin, one of the first calls was from President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, who thanked our prosecution team directly. So not just public pronouncement, but also individual and personal contact. I think they're a very, very compassionate, very concerned duo, and I'm glad about it.
Governor Bullock, I want to talk about, we talked about Montana. This is a grudge match, basically, for Donald Trump. He was trying to get his personal physician, Ronnie Jackson, appointed to head the Department of Veteran Affairs. John Tester, who's in a tough race for the Senate there, the Democrat, blocked that. And Donald Trump, once you get on his list, he's going to go after you. But let's talk about how this Harris-Walz campaign can reach out to and can touch and possibly convince people in states like yours that are not usually front and center in these campaigns. We're going to see a lot of that this time. We're not just talking about the swing states. We're obviously talking about them, but how they appeal to people in other states who feel that they haven't necessarily always connected with the Democratic Party. How can that work?
No, I think it's exciting. Look, I've known the vice president. We served as attorneys general together. And Governor Walz, I was National Governor Association chair when he first came in. And what they'll focus on is actually making sure everybody has, a fair shot at a better life, not just tax breaks for the larger corporations and wealthy people. And I think as General Ellison certainly knows, Tim had run and represented a district not unlike Montana, not unlike a lot of places in this country that often do feel like, look, the Democratic Party isn't fighting for their best interest. But as long as we're talking about issues that people are talking about either at the bar, across a fence post, their kitchen table, we'll get there. And actually, I think that they can be persuasive. Think about what Governor Walz's whole sort of message was as governor. It's like, make Minnesota the best place to have a child. And that had to do with things like the child tax credit, paid medical leave, lunches in schools. Those are issues that people care about. And I think Walz and Harris, or Harris and Walz, can actually take that forward and be much more competitive all across this country.
Attorney General, you have witnessed firsthand how Governor Walz has achieved progress in Minnesota with a Democratic-controlled with a Democratic-controlled legislature. You got paid family leave, free meals for school kids, enshrined abortion rights, feminine hygiene products. Trump is now attacking him and Kamala Harris, and frankly, anybody who would have run on the ticket, as too progressive, radical, leftist, socialist, all these kinds of things that are actually widely popular in Minnesota, widely popular across the country, and widely popular across the industrialized world.
Well, look, Tim Walz was a teacher. He knows that it's hard to teach kids if they're hungry. So when he's governor, he says, let's make sure kids have a lunch. And we're not going to ask questions about, who's got the money or who doesn't. He just says, let's make sure every kid is eating so that they can focus in school. That's pragmatic. People call it whatever they want. They want to stamp an ideological label on it, but what it really is just meeting the needs of the people who you represent. It's same thing when it comes to the child tax credit, making sure that families have the resources they need to make Minnesota the best place in the country to raise a child. That's what it's all about, to raise your family and get it done. Tim Walz is also the kind of guy who will campaign in places where you only have occasional voters. He will go into neighborhoods and communities, rural communities, places where people live in manufactured housing, sometimes called mobile home parks. And he will walk in there with his camo jacket on, sit down with that big smile of his, shake some hands, and communicate to people that he cares about them. So a lot of the ideas that came out of the administration, the Minnesota governor's office and legislature, were based on conversations that Walz and others had with Minnesotans, whether they live in an urban environment where, like, George Floyd was killed, or in rural communities. The governor's right. Governor Bullock is absolutely right. Tim Walz won in the 1st congressional district, which is demographically a lot of farms, a lot of folks who are looking for an opportunity and who feel that this economy has not included them. How did he get over the hump?
Yep.
Talking to people directly, whether or not they're on the frequent voter list or not, caring, sitting down, listening. That's how he won. And by the way, it was a Republican seat until he ran.
Yep.
And after he ran for governor, we don't have that seat now. So the guy had something special.
Guys, stay with me. I want to continue this conversation right after a break. We'll be back with more Velshi after this.
Why use 10 buckets of water when you can use one fire extinguisher? And to fight heartburn, why take 10 antacids throughout the day when you can take one Prilosec? For easier heartburn relief, 1 beats 10. Prilosec OTC. 1 pill, 24 hours, 0 heartburn.
We're still going for that nice catch.
We're still going for that perfect pizza. And with higher stroke risk from AFib not caused by a heart valve problem,
We're going for a better treatment than warfarin. Eliquis. Eliquis reduces stroke risk and has less major bleeding. Over 97% of Eliquis patients did not experience a stroke.
Don't stop taking Eliquis without talking to your doctor, as this may increase your risk of stroke. Eliquis can cause serious and, in rare cases, fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve or abnormal bleeding. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. Get help right away for unexpected bleeding or unusual bruising. It may increase your bleeding risk if you take certain medicines. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures.
The #1 cardiologist prescribed blood thinner. Ask your doctor about Eliquis.
Not every decision you make will be as good as getting a Volkswagen at the Savvy VW Summer Sales Event. 2024 Volkswagen models cost less to maintain than Honda.
Get 0.9% APR financing or a $3,500 customer bonus on a new 2024 Atlas or Atlas Cross Sport.
Everywhere but the seat. The seat is leather.
Alan, we get it. You love your bike. We do too.
That's why we're America's #1 motorcycle insurer.
But do you have to wedge it into everything?
What? I don't do that. This reminds me of my bike. The Wolf was about the size of my new motorcycle. Have you seen it, by the way? Happy birthday, Grandma!
Really?
Look how the brushstrokes follow the line of the gas tank.
Hey!
Brought my +1. Jamie.
We're a society in crisis. But what if we turned our discord into dialogue? What if CEOs, CHROs, and politicos were catalysts for civility? Civility is, after all, the sweet part that takes the bitterness out of toxic disagreements. At SHRM, we know people in businesses are at their best when they lead with civility. So join me in starting 1 million civil conversations to shape a better workplace and a better world.
Over 1 million people have put Super Beats by Human blood pressure support supplements to the test. And the numbers tell the story. We have over 80,000 5-star ratings and reviews. We're trusted by over 120 pro and college sports teams. Super Beats is the #1 selling beet brand. The only #1 doctor, pharmacist, and cardiologist recommended beet brand for heart health support. See why we've won the hearts of people across America and get a free month supply on all bundles at superbeats.com.
I was seeing this bra all over my Instagram feed. I'm sure you're seeing it too.
This is the most comfortable bra I've ever put on in my life. I love it because, one, it's not underwire. I hate underwire. It smooths out your back. It doesn't give you back fat or back rolls. You can wear this under a t-shirt and it wouldn't leave any marks or bulges. So not only is it super supportive, lifting and smoothing, but you have all that without an underwire and without a ton of padding.
So if you're looking at this and it's available, I promise you won't regret it.
Try risk-free. Free returns on all orders.
With y'all, I get to decide when I get paid. My pay lets me get up to $500 of my pay when I need it. There's no interest, no credit checks, no mandatory fees. And that's why I Chime. Join me at chime.com and get paid when you say.
I love how light it feels. It's not heavy, it's not cakey. I feel like I'm not wearing any makeup at all. I don't see any other reason to try any other makeup foundation ever.
In the almost 3 weeks since Joe Biden ended his re-election campaign and Kamala Harris took over at the top of the Democratic ticket, there's been an undeniable shift in the presidential race. For the first time in a long time, the vibes are good within the Democratic Party, with something of an emphasis on party. It was only a few weeks ago when Donald Trump, fresh off an attempt on his life, seemed to have all the momentum, which gave Republicans something to be pumped about at their national convention in Milwaukee last month. But now it's Harris and the Democrats who appear to be running the more enthusiastic and energetic campaign, with less than 3 months left until Election Day. Democratic delegates officially made Harris the party's nominee this week, and the Democratic convention will take place in Chicago next week. And since becoming the official nominee, Harris has been on a campaign blitz with her newly chosen running mate, the Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Yesterday, many supporters waited in the line in 105-degree heat ahead of their rally in Glendale, Arizona, although they tell me it's a dry heat, where the pair continued to draw a sharp contrast between the optimistic campaign that they're running and Trump's campaign of retribution.
She has brought back compassion and decency and humor and joy to our politics.
What kind of country do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a country of chaos, fear, and hate? Or a country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law?
Arizona, as I mentioned earlier, was the fourth battleground state that the pair has visited in as many days, and over 15,000 people turned out for that rally last night. They also hosted energetic rallies this week in Pennsylvania, 12,000 people, Wisconsin, 12,000 people, another one in Michigan, 15,000 people, all according to the Harris campaign. That high level of enthusiasm may be moving the needle. According to a brand new poll released this morning by the New York Times and Siena College, Harris is leading Trump 50-46 in those three important battleground states. And there are other small and early signs that voters are responding well to the upbeat campaign. On Thursday, the Cook Political Report changed their forecast for three other battleground states, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. All three had been rated as lean Republican. They're now in the toss-up category. Harris and Walz will continue their campaign blitz in a fifth swing state tonight, Nevada, which Biden won by fewer than 4,000 votes in 2020. Meanwhile, Trump has only held one rally in a battleground state so far this month, Georgia. He actually spent most of the week out of the public eye. He emerged on Thursday to give a rambling and bizarre press conference from Mar-a-Lago. Then he appeared at a rally in the deep red state of Montana last night, where it became apparent that Harris's well-attended rallies are starting to get under his skin and making him wish Biden was back in the race.
I hear he's going to make a comeback at the Democrat convention. He's going to walk into the room and he's going to say, I want my presidency back. I want another chance to debate Trump. I want another chance.
Trump, as we mentioned, was in Montana in part to campaign for Tim Sheehy, the Republican candidate for Senate, who's going up against the Democratic incumbent John Tester, a guy that Trump dislikes very much. But Harris's surge in the presidential race has forced Trump to be on the defensive. Enthusiasm for her campaign has led to record-breaking numbers and amounts of donations, which has resulted in Harris having a lot more cash in hand than her Republican opponent, which may be one of the reasons why Trump has spent a lot of his time attending private fundraisers lately instead of hitting the campaign trail in battleground states with his embattled running mate, J.D. Vance. The former president has also suggested and struggled to figure out an effective strategy to attack Harris. His recent attempt to question her blackness completely backfired, and none of the nicknames he's been testing out for her has stuck. He's called her incompetent, he's called her dumb, claiming that she can't even string two sentences together, and criticized her for not holding a press conference or sitting down for an interview since becoming her party's nominee. Now here is Trump trying to string two sentences together at the press conference he held at Mar-a-Lago on Thursday in response to a very direct, very specific yes or no question about whether he would ban the abortion drug mifepristone.
You could do things that would supplement, absolutely. And those things are pretty open and humane. But you have to be able to have a vote.
I stand corrected. That was apparently one sentence he was trying to string together. Now, if those criticisms sound familiar, it's because Trump is just recycling some of the same old attack lines on Harris that he used against Biden. And when all else failed, he pivoted to fear-mongering. In an email sent out this week, his campaign claimed that Harris and Walz will unleash hell on earth. Hell on earth. Compare that with Walz's rebranding of Harris as the candidate who's bringing back the joy. Harrison Walz's pivot is also a departure from the campaign that Biden was running, which focused largely on saving democracy from the threat of Trump, a very real threat. Polls may show that Harris has improved upon Biden's numbers from earlier this summer, but for the most part, the race still remains very, very tight and very, very competitive, and neither candidate is running away with this election. Back with me, Steve Bullock, the former two-term governor of Montana, and Keith Ellison, the attorney general of Minnesota. He's a former congressman for the state and the author of the book, Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Political Violence. Governor, you were a presidential candidate. And you have all sorts of choices when you're a presidential candidate about what tone you're going to set. Kamala Harris leaned into freedom and joy right from the outset. And freedom is still about Donald Trump and the dangers he's going to impose. It's still about abortion. It's still about book banning. It's still about gun deaths. But she's framing it differently than I frame it. I warn people, if you vote for Trump, you might see the end of American democracy. She's taking a completely different, much more positive approach. How do you think it's going?
No, I think it's really going well, Allie, from the perspective of these are big, big threats, right? This 250-year experiment called representative democracy is a threat, being threatened. A woman having dominion and control over her reproductive health care choices wherever she lives certainly is threatened. And we see that all over. What you see in 900 pages of Project 2025 is a threat to how we actually live and govern in this country. But by saying, look, this is about freedoms, my freedom, the freedom over a woman's body, the freedom actually to read what you want, the freedom to make sure that we continue to vote, the freedom to ensure that you have those basic necessities, which for a lot of folks are things like Social Security and Medicare. I think making it the positive frame, giving some people, Americans, a reason to both support, not just be concerned and vote against. I think it's been playing well over the next 3 weeks, but it's also going to play well over the next 87 days because what we see is Harris and Walz are worried about people's lives. They're not just worried about themselves, which is what we're seeing with Trump and Vance.
Attorney General, interesting thing happened this week. Vice President Harris has seemingly, from an empathy perspective, been ahead of President Biden as it relates to the war in Israel and Gaza. She has stated very clearly in the past she wants to see a ceasefire, she wants those hostages released, and she wants civilian deaths in Gaza to stop. Something happened in Michigan earlier this week where she got into it with some protesters. There are protesters at every event, and some suggested that she sort of lacked empathy in her response. She then addressed it again. It came up in Arizona Arizona. There were more hecklers and protesters last night in Arizona, and she had changed her tune. She heard them. She was not dismissive of them, and she reiterated that she wants to see a ceasefire and an end to the civilian deaths and a release of the hostages. She pivoted back to her original position fairly effectively, which I thought was a sign of a responsive and good candidate.
Well, you know, she does care about people. She cares about people, certainly in the United States, but really all over the world. And I know that her heart grieves, like all of us, for the innocent civilians who've been killed and the people both in Israel and in Gaza. The reality is that the humanitarian situation is grave. It's not only massive loss of life, which we have seen, but we've also seen displacement of communities. We've seen people who have food insecure, and a lot of those folks have family members in the United States and people who care. So she is responding. She is concerned, and I am confident that with a Harris-Walz administration, that there will be ongoing dialogue about how to bring forth meaningful change that will allow both Gazans and Palestinians and Israelis to live in peace. They will focus on this issue because they care and they understand that it is important for the stability of the United States. It is in the national interest of our country to have peace, security, stability, and therefore justice in that part of the world.
I'm so appreciative to the two of you, not just for this discussion and for kicking us off this morning, but you both have been such great friends of the show over the years. It's great to see you. Thank you, Steve Bullock, the former two-term governor of Montana and co-chair of American Bridge 21st Century, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota. Coming up, how Republican members of a key swing state's election board are working to make it easier for election officials not to certify the results of the upcoming election.
It's mesmerizing. Cleaning that greasy mess with Dawn Platinum.
And not even scrubbing.
Well, fluff my feathers. It cuts through the slimy stuff better than their old dish soap, removing 99% of grease. That's why only Dawn is trusted to save wildlife.
Messy happens. When it does, there's HomeAglow. For just $19, HomeAglow will clean your entire house. Everything from dishes to vacuuming, even laundry. Join thousands of Americans and book your first cleaning today for just $19.
We do so much behind the scenes to keep our families on track. That is why Skylight Calendar is a game changer. I synced it with my Apple and Google calendars, made a chore chart for the kids, and it all updates automatically. Now everyone just checks the Skylight Calendar.
DealDash.com. Online auctions since 2009. This PlayStation 5 sold for only 50 cents. This iPad Pro sold for less than $34. And this Nintendo Switch sold for less than $20. Go to DealDash.com and see how much you can save.
You were hired to be a maintenance manager, but everyone really knows you as a repair expert, a procurement specialist, and a problem solver. No matter what you're called, you know who to call to help keep your operation running. Grainger has over 1 million products, including the one you need now, plus the scale to deliver next day on most orders, so you can focus on delivering for the ones who count on you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Oh, come on.
Trade in any phone in any condition guaranteed at Verizon and get the new Galaxy S24 on us. Only on Verizon.
I'm certain it's level 5.
Are you for Imprint certain?
Certainty matters. 4imprint is your home for promo gear to wow clients and inspire your team. Check out 4imprint.com.
4imprint for certain.
At his rally in Atlanta, Georgia last Saturday, Donald Trump slammed Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, both Republicans, for refusing to help overturn the 2020 election. He complained about them, accused them of doing everything possible to make 2024 difficult for Republicans to win. And after Trump repeated his age-old lie that he won Georgia in 2020, he then pivoted to praising some other Georgia officials.
I don't know if you've heard, but the Georgia State Election Board is in a very positive way. This is a very positive thing, Marjorie. They're on fire. They're doing a great job. 3 members, Janice Johnson, Rick Jeffries, and Janelle King. 3 people are all pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory. They're fighting.
Those people Trump just name-checked are 3 of the 5 members of Georgia's State Board of Elections, Marjorie. They're all Republicans, and all of them have questioned the results of the 2020 election. Well, this past Tuesday, in a 3-2 vote, those 3 pit bulls approved a rule that threatens to upend how elections are certified in Georgia. The new rule empowers county election board members to conduct a, quote, reasonable inquiry, end quote, into whether election results are complete and accurate before they certify them. However, the new rule doesn't define what a reasonable inquiry entails, meaning that election officials in Georgia's 159 counties can each decide for themselves what they consider to be reasonable. Legal experts have expressed concern that the rule could be used as justification not to certify votes for partisan reasons or to further the baseless allegations of election fraud that Trump and his MAGA ilk have been pushing for years. And that's the problem. Democratic elections attorney Mark Elias said the new rule is, quote, another powerful tool in Trump's election subversion arsenal, saying, quote, he wants to be able to pick and choose which election results are accepted based solely on the outcome. This rule is a step in that direction, end quote. Fast forward to Wednesday, when the State Board of Elections met again. This time, those same 3 pit bulls voted to ask the state's Attorney General, Christopher Carr, to reopen an investigation into how Fulton County, Fulton County, Georgia, which is essentially Atlanta, handled the 2020 election. The board members want to revisit the case of about 3,000 ballots from Fulton County that were erroneously double scanned, a mistake that Fulton County admitted to. Ironically, the actual votes on those ballots disproportionately favored Donald Trump and wouldn't have benefited Biden. Georgia is a critically important battleground state, and this election will certainly be a close one. But as the Georgia GOP appears to be working hard to revise voting rules in their favor, it may not be an even playing field. After a break, I'll talk to the sole Democratic member of the Georgia Board of Elections.
T-Mobile's 5G network connects 100,000 Delta employees so they can make every customer feel like they've arrived before they've left the ground. This is how business goes further with T-Mobile for Business.
Whether you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s and beyond, I know you're seeing changes in the skin on your body. Don't panic. It's never too late to transform yourself and your skin. And Crepe Erase is here to do just that.
Crepe Erase has been delivering smoother, firmer, younger-looking skin for almost a decade.
Did you know that Crepe Erase is America's #1 selling anti-aging body treatment system for dry, crepey skin? That's because it works, people.
The Crepe Erase 2-step system is clinically shown to reduce crepey-looking skin the very first time you use it.
I just love my skin. I didn't love it before. I love it now.
And now there's big news. We're introducing the Skin Revitalizing Tool, specially designed to amplify the power of Crepe Erase.
This is the Skin Revitalizing Tool. It is new and it is free. Yes, you heard me right. It's free when you get the product.
Crepe Erase is already an incredible deal at only $49.95. But when you order today, we'll send you the Skin Revitalizing Tool, a $129 value free.
I mean, it's like having a spa in your hand.
And you'll also receive our luxurious neck repair treatment, a $49 value, free.
Since using Crepe Erase, the skin on my neck looks airbrushed. I love it.
These 2 incredible bonuses are valued together at $178, but they're our free gift to you.
Crepe Erase is something I recommend to my patients because it works.
Don't wait. Get all this, a $247 value for only $49.95, plus free shipping.
If you're not reveling in your younger-looking, soft and sexy skin, just return the bottles, even if they're used up and empty, and we'll give you your money back.
This is a limited-time offer that will not last. Scan the QR code, call, or go to crepeerase.com and order right now.
Achy joints? Reach for the spray. Muscle soreness? Reach for the spray. With Tidal, next generation pain relief. Tidal Cryotherapy Spray and the all-new Tidal Heat Therapy Spray reach where it hurts and penetrate deep for rapid relief. The 360-degree spray reaches anywhere, dries fast, and lasts.
It relieves the pain quickly so I can continue doing what I love.
Trusted by athletes and over 1 million satisfied users. Tidal, available online or at your favorite retailer.
Looking for a way to stretch the dollar? With Insurify, you can cut your car insurance bill in half. Scroll through dozens of prices and tap to switch online. That's it. No phone calls and no wasted time. Go to Insurify and save today.
Tomorrow, one night, 2 compelling documentaries. At 9, To Be Destroyed, the story of one community's fight against book banning.
My book, along with 4 others, was pulled from the shelves.
Followed by It's Okay, a short film about embracing differences in small-town America.
Can I share some stories with you? It's okay to be different.
Back-to-back documentaries. Tomorrow at 9 on MSNBC.
Joining me now, Sarah Tyndall Gazelle, the sole Democratic member of the Georgia Board of Elections. Sarah, good to see you again. You and I talked the other day, but I thought this was such an important conversation. I'd like to have it again with you a little more completely. I'm trying to get my head around this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an elections official. So I'm trying to understand what this concept of reasonable inquiry that anybody, that elections people in any of the 159 counties can say. So they can count the votes. They can say they were, you know, whatever, they were counted, the machines worked, all that kind of stuff. But they can come up with something called a reasonable inquiry, and we don't know what that means exactly.
And that's exactly the problem. The Georgia statute defines the canvass process and certification very specifically in law. You make sure that every valid vote was tabulated and is included in those vote totals. And the law describes exactly where you need to look, what you need to look for, and how you do that process. And it also describes that by 5 o'clock on the Monday after the election, counties must certify those elections. The law says they shall certify. That means it is a mandatory process. They have no discretion in it. So entering into the rules as a phrase like reasonable inquiry creates uncertainty. And that appears to me to be the whole purpose of it.
Well, are there, you know, I would think that if one were to say, given what has happened in Georgia in the past or in any state, these are the categories. If this happens, you can have an inquiry. If this happens, you can have an inquiry. For specific things, the machine overcounts, double counts, whatever the case is. Are there safeguards in place to prevent this rule from being used arbitrarily to delay or deny vote certifications?
Well, like I said, the law still says that certification shall happen. So the courts are the safeguard in place. The Secretary of State has announced that he expects every county to certify by 5 p.m. on Monday afterwards. But you have to take this rule in context, which is there's also an ongoing court case spearheaded by the same board member who has been pushing some of these rules in Fulton County that, and the legal theory of the case is they are literally trying to force the courts to change certification into a discretionary task. And they are represented by the America First Policy Institute. So this is not just a good faith effort to make sure our county boards are doing their jobs. This is a deliberate and coordinated effort to undermine the certification process.
So let's talk about courts. Is there a likelihood that this particular new rule will be challenged in court? And is there a risk, perhaps, that lawsuits will come once counties start either counting or missing certification deadlines? Because that's what everybody's worried about, right? Are we not going to know how Georgia voted for weeks or months after the election?
Right. So I do expect that there will be court challenges to the rules because obviously it is an unlawful use of administrative authority to pass a rule that does not comport with the law. And in my view, that's what we've just done is we're violating state statute with this rule. But I also expect that there will be court challenges if a county refuses to certify.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about the Fulton County situation? Because that was adjudicated. This is part of the issue, that everything that went right or wrong in the 2020 election has been adjudicated. So Fulton County did have an issue. It would not have benefited Donald Trump regardless, but it was adjudicated. They figured out what was wrong and in theory have fixed it. Tell me a bit about that, please.
Right. So this is probably the 6th or 7th, I haven't counted, but number of investigations into what happened in Fulton County in 2020. And the last one was exactly how you described it. There were a batch of ballots, 3,000 and a handful, that were scanned twice. Did not affect the vote totals because they were not for one candidate. In fact, as you pointed out, disproportionately for the former president. And the county has changed everything since 2020. They have changed their headquarters. They have changed their leadership. The board has changed. But most importantly, they've added lots of new procedures in place and safeguards to prevent this from happening again. And that's been the primary focus of the board, is to make sure that, yes, we acknowledge what happened, make sure that Fulton County doesn't do this again, and that we are looking forward to 2024 to make sure that everybody's vote is counted accurately and the results reflect the will of the voters. That's what elections are all about.
Notwithstanding the politicization of this part of the process, are you, as a Georgia State Board, state election board member, confident in Georgia's ability to execute the election and count the ballots, notwithstanding the fact that 159 counties can all do this inquiry, reasonable inquiry? Do you think that the election can be fair in Georgia?
I absolutely believe the election can be fair in Georgia if we are operating on the rules that we have today. The problem is this board is now trying to change the rules 90 days before the election, 86 days before the election. We entered into rulemaking something that would change the way absentee ballots are accepted. It won't go into force until 40 days before the election. There's another rule that we entered into rulemaking that would change the way that absentee ballots and emergency ballots are printed. It won't come into force until after our overseas and military ballots have already been mailed out. And that is deeply concerning to me, that they're changing the rules at the last second. And that is where chaos happens.
I'm glad we've had the second conversation because it gets clearer to me every time we talk. So I appreciate the time that you've taken. Sarah Tindall-Gazelle is the Georgia State Election Board member. Thanks for joining us. Well, still to come, we're continuing our new ongoing series, Inside Project 2025. Today, we're turning to Chapter 22 of the 922-page manifesto, which focuses on the Treasury Department to find out how a new Trump administration would remake the tax system, including a massive and permanent tax hike on working and middle-class families to fund tax cuts for the richest Americans.
This is our night.
Shingles doesn't care, but Shingrix protects. Only Shingrix is proven over 90% effective. Shingrix is a vaccine used to prevent shingles in adults 50 years and older. Shingrix does not protect everyone and is not for those with severe allergic reactions to its ingredients or to a previous dose. An increased risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome was observed after getting Shingrix. Fainting can also happen. The most common side effects are pain, redness, and swelling at the injection site, muscle pain, tiredness, headache, shivering, fever, and upset stomach. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Shingrix today.
We realize some home maintenance jobs aren't worth the risk.
That's when we call Leaf Filter to protect our gutters.
Leaf Filter's patented filter technology keeps debris out of your gutters for good, guaranteed. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or visit leaffilter.com.
Nexium 24-hour prevents heartburn acid before it begins. Get all day and all night heartburn acid prevention with just one pill a day. Choose acid prevention. Choose Nexium.
Hi, I'm Jay Jackson. For almost 20 years, Abacus Life has been purchasing life insurance policies from seniors. And in just seconds, you can use the free calculator at abacuspays.com to learn what your policy might be worth.
For many of my clients, selling their life insurance to Abacus was right for them and their estate plan.
Don't sell or lapse your policy without going to abacuspays.com first. There are no fees and no obligations. Get the real value from your life insurance when you need it with Abacus.
Listen, I might not be a relationship expert, but I do have some hacks. They say, Lauren, what's the secret to a long, sustained relationship? It's Blue Chew. Blue Chew. Blue Chew? Blue Chew. Blue Chew. Blue Chew. Blue Chew. Blue Chew, baby! Blue Chew is an online subscription-based service that sends these affordable tablets directly to your home. No one even has to know. Except for me. But I'm not gonna tell on you.
One of Donald Trump's signature pieces of legislation as president was the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, better known as the Trump tax cuts. The rich benefited. A slashed corporate tax rate boosted executive salaries, but it failed to trickle down to workers. And the personal income tax cuts were skewed several orders of magnitude toward the top 1% of earners. Many of the Trump tax cut provisions are going to expire in 2025, which is where Project 2025 steps in. This 922-page handbook for the next conservative presidency takes a big swing at tax policy, and the changes suggested would mean higher taxes for the average American family, widening America's already massive income gap. And here's how. This year, the United States has 7 tax brackets. Your taxable income and filing status determine which bracket you fall under, and your bracket determines your tax rate, which outlines the percentage that you'll owe on different portions of your income. The top tax bracket has a federal income tax rate of 37%. The lowest bracket has a 10% income tax. Millions of Americans, by the way, don't make enough money to fall into any of the 7 brackets, which means they do not pay federal income tax, though virtually all Americans pay some form of tax, whether it's sales tax or state tax or property tax. But about 40% of American households end up not owing any federal income tax when they apply for government tax credits and deductions. Not so under Project 2025. In fact, on page 696 of Project 2025, it calls for, quote, simplifying the tax structure by enacting a simple 2-rate individual tax system of 15% and 30% that eliminates most deductions, credits, and exclusions. So, depending on your current income, you could be taxed more or less under this plan, but for millions of working-class Americans, taxes would shoot up. By raising the floor of our tax brackets but lowering the ceiling, Project 2025 would shift the country's tax burden from the rich to middle and lower class Americans. It's a tax hike for working class Americans. According to analysis from the Center for American Progress, a nonpartisan policy institute, under this new system, the average family of 4 would see a tax increase of $2,985. While households reporting over $10 million in income would see a tax cut of $1.5 million. And to address the second part of that section, eliminating, quote, most deductions, credits, and exclusions, the tax credits work like government incentives, allowing citizens to write off expenses that are generally in society's interest. Project 2025 just says eliminate most. So which ones? Eliminate the tax credit meant to give tax breaks to parents with children under 17? Sure. It was only used by 36 million households in 2022. Eliminate the American Opportunity Tax Credit, which allows people to write off tuition costs and school supplies? Why not? Eliminate climate credits, included in the president's Inflation Reduction Act? Those tax breaks are meant to encourage folks to live climate-conscious lives. They've been more popular than expected since they were introduced, including, according to new data released by the Treasury Department, Americans collectively claimed $8.4 billion by using one of Biden's green subsidies to build solar panels or otherwise make their homes more energy efficient. And everything we've gone over so far is jammed into just one single sentence on page 696 in this massive tome. So I want to look at some of the other suggestions in Project 2025. It suggests decreasing the corporate tax rate to 18%. It had already been cut to 21% by the Trump tax cuts. It was at 35% before that. It calls for a new consumption tax, which is charged to you when you spend money, and floats the idea of a national sales tax. Sales and consumption taxes are the most regressive form of taxes and represent a vastly disproportionate burden for poor and middle-class families. Project 2025 argues for the repeal of the excise tax on drug manufacturers, which would destroy the government's ability to control the price of prescription medication. It calls for a cap of $12,000 on untaxed employee benefits that companies can write off for deductions, which would disincentivize employers from offering more comprehensive health benefits. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, the average family medical plan costs $17,000, $5,000 more than that write-off. So Project 2025 is interested in both making employer-provided health care more costly for companies and making private health care more costly for the patient. But wait, there's more. Project 2025 suggests the next conservative president lock the door and snap the key so these policies cannot be undone. Quote, Treasury should support legislation instituting a 3/5 vote threshold in the U.S. House and the Senate to raise income or corporate tax rates to create a wall of protection for the new rate structure. That's on page 698. Former President Trump, for his part, has been touting another brilliant tax scheme. This was him on Thursday at a press conference at Mar-a-Lago.
We're not going to charge tax to Social Security, the seniors. We're not going to do it. We're not going to charge. And also tax. I say the two things. We're going to have no tax on seniors, Social Security, and we're going to have no tax on tips. Very simple.
Putting aside that he really does seem to have trouble stringing two sentences that make any sense together, that what he just said sounds like a sweet deal, like how a kid running for class president promises pizza for lunch every day. But when you read between the lines, it doesn't actually add up. Removing a tax on tips, the Center for American Progress said, would do little for restaurant servers, but deliver big to, say, money managers who could, under this law, transform commissions that they earn into a tip-based model and pay no tax on their earnings. As far as taxes on Social Security, a majority of low and middle-income Americans on Social Security do not earn enough money to be taxed on their benefits, but rich folks do. Higher earners who still receive Social Security because it's a universal benefit would benefit the most. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, eliminating taxes on Social Security would accelerate Social Security's insolvency by a year to 2032, and it would bring Medicaid to insolvency in 2030, 6 years ahead of the current rate. It would increase the deficit by over $1 trillion, which will then lead to more cuts. Now, if these policies don't benefit you and they don't benefit the government programs, whom exactly do they benefit? I'll let you guess.
Head & Shoulders is launching something huge. The bare minimum. Anti-dandruff shampoo made with only 9 ingredients, no sulfate, silicones, or dyes, and packaged with 45% less plastic, giving you outstanding dandruff protection and leaving hair beautiful and moisturized. Major dandruff protection, minimal ingredients. Job done. New Head & Shoulders Bare.
Bombas makes absurdly comfortable underwear. Made to move with you, not on you. Because your basic things should be your best things. One purchased equals one donated. Visit bombas.com and get 20% off your first order.
Heather likes things smooth, so she came to Row to start losing weight with GLP-1s. Now she's on her way to losing 20% of her weight in a year with diet and exercise.
Now that's smooth.
We got you, Heather. Connect with a provider at row.co/TV.
We planned well for retirement, but I wish we had more cash.
You think those two have any idea
that they can sell their life insurance policy for cash, so they're basically sitting on a gold mine? I don't think they have a clue.
That's crazy.
Well, not everyone knows Coventry has helped thousands of people sell their policies for cash, even term policies.
I can't believe they're just sitting up there.
Sitting on all this cash.
If you own a life insurance policy of $100,000 or more, you can sell all or part of it to Coventry, even a term policy, for cash or a combination of cash and coverage with no future premiums.
Someone needs to tell them that they're sitting on a gold mine and you have no idea. Hey, guys! You're sitting on a gold mine!
Do you hear that?
I don't hear anything anymore.
Find out if you're sitting on a gold mine. Call Coventry Direct today at 800-459-2600 or visit coventrydirect.com.
Joining me now is Dorothy Brown. She's a professor and chair in taxation at Georgetown University Law Center. She's the author of the book, The Whiteness.
Heroic organizations who have held Donald Trump's feet to the fire when he was president. They could leak personal tax return information just for embarrassment or for doxing. And while that's illegal, who would stop them? Not the Department of Justice. That would be just another arm of the administration under Trump 2.0. And how would they do this? By creating or increasing the number of people who work at Treasury and across the federal government whose job depends on pleasing the president. I'm angry about this, and we should all be angry because they want to target our fellow Americans and use our tax dollars to do it.
Yeah, you bring up a point that that every expert who we have on every topic here brings up, and that is the Schedule F and the firing of up to 50,000 expert bureaucrats and replacing them with loyalists is the part of this thing that is most dangerous because it will entrench this. It's not the kind of thing a next president could come in and reverse because now you've entrenched politics in what is supposed to be an apolitical project. The other matter that bothers me is the regressive nature of these taxes, right? The concept of there's just going to be two tax levels. Everybody floats this every time there's an election. Sounds great, right? A flat tax. You can fill out your taxes on a postcard. There's a reason we don't fill out our taxes on a postcard because people have lots of reasons why not to give the government more money than they need to. And some of those reasons are really valid. There's stuff in here that's just downright regressive, including a consumption tax, because it doesn't matter whether I earn $1 billion a year or $10,000 a year, I probably drink the same amount of milk. So if you make the $10,000 person pay more for consuming milk than you make the $1 billion person, that's unfair.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it will affect our lowest income Americans, our lowest income workers who are doing everything they can, working multiple jobs to try to make ends meet. And they do it. Why? So that you can give corporations a lower tax rate, which means corporate shareholders, which means the richest Americans among us. That is not fair. And it goes back to their wanting to change or reverse, in their language, the quote unquote racist equity agenda, when all the Biden administration has done in the Treasury Department is seek fairness. They don't want to play fair.
Talk to me about this two-rate, nearly flat tax system. What, good or bad?
Yes, it's bad because it's exactly what you said. So the highest tax rate now is 37%. It goes down to 30%. So millionaires who are already escaping taxation get another break. They want the tax rate on income from stock to go down from 20% to 15%. Which would be higher than working class Americans would pay because they don't have money in the stock market in a way that gives them that access to that low 15% rate. So working class, middle class Americans would see their taxes go up, and the richest Americans, like those oil barons, right, who were in the room with Trump, talking about getting tax breaks, talking about getting policies that support them. Those people, those billionaires, they would love this. And that's just not fair.
Professor Brown, good to talk to you. Thank you so much. Dorothy Brown is a professor and chair in taxation at Georgetown University Law Center and author of Whiteness of Wealth, How the Tax System Impoverishes Black Americans and How We Can Fix It. Straight ahead, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are out west this weekend, but that is where any and all similarities end, from tone to tenor to message. Plus, I'll call to order this week's meeting of the Velshi Band Book Club. Author Anthony Doerr joins me to discuss his Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, All the Light We Cannot See. Another hour of Velshi begins now. And good morning. It's Saturday, August the 10th. We're 87 days away from the election. There's been a palpable shift in the presidential race ever since Kamala Harris took over as the Democratic presidential nominee. For the first time in a long time, the vibes are good within the Democratic Party, with something of an emphasis on the word party. It was only a few weeks ago when Donald Trump, fresh off an attempt on his life, seemed to have all of the momentum, which gave Republicans something to be pumped about at their national convention in Milwaukee last month. But now it's Harris and the Democrats who appear to be running the more enthusiastic and energetic campaign, with less than 3 months left until Election Day. Democratic delegates officially made Harris the party's nominee this week, and the Democratic